thank you, first of all, for inviting us to come and talk to you. Again, my name is Greg Rewis. I am the principal evangelist for our Open Web Standards products at Adobe. And what that means really, right now, you know us for Dreamweaver. I'm going to talk a lot about Dreamweaver. But we are also working on other tooling around HTML5 as well. While I go through the presentation, if you do have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, throw something at me if I don't see you. Please do not be shy. And if you do absolutely have to ask in Czech, I won't understand the question, but I'm sure someone would translate for me. So please do ask questions. Before I dive in, just to let you know, I actually know a thing or two about HTML and about the web. I put my first homepage on the web in 1994. That's before most of you were even out of diapers, it looks like. Maybe even born, some of you. Back then, the web was not even really anything that we thought about in terms of, we couldn't even imagine what we would be doing on the web today back then. And for me at that time, what we were doing is I was working in the newspaper and magazine business, and we were trying to see how we could republish our information and reach a broader audience. In doing so, one of the first challenges that we found was there was nothing out there to write HTML. Back then, you wrote HTML as open bracket HTML, close bracket, in Notepad or TextEdit, which used to be known as Simple Text back on the very early Mac computers I was working on. So some friends and I was living in Hamburg, Germany at the time, and some friends and I up there in Hamburg, we actually created a company to create one of the very first visual web authoring tools. Do you know what the name was? Nobody? Do you remember any early HTML authoring tools? How about one called Go Live? Anybody heard of it?
We did everything in Notepad.
Oh, you did. Glutton for punishment. Well, Go Live was actually bought by Adobe. It became Adobe Go Live. I left and I actually went to Macromedia to build Dreamweaver. And so I've been working on Dreamweaver since the very first version. And it's sort of funny because every time a new version of a product comes out, we say, this is the best version ever. So, this is the best version ever. And it really is, because with this version of Dreamweaver, we've actually really embraced HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, all the things that we call HTML5, if you will, okay? Because we all know there's a lot more to HTML5 than what Steve tells us there is, and there's a lot less to HTML5 than what Steve tells us. So with that, I want to just talk to you a little bit about HTML5. Before I dive into the actual demonstration, are you using HTML5 today? I see both heads. Okay, so maybe we'll do this, right? So the question is, for those that are not, why not? Browser support, very good question, or very good answer. However, I will tell you that would have been my concern a year ago. Today, I'm not as concerned about that, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. For those that are using HTML5, how are you doing? Is it working for you? Yes? No? Sort of? Exactly, more like that? Yeah, right. Okay, so that is something I want to sort of talk about as we go through the presentation. So let me go ahead, and I'm just going to switch into Dreamweaver for a moment. And we'll start talking about HTML5. What is it? If I was just to ask you, in fact, let's start there. What is HTML5? When Steve said, thou shalt use HTML5, what did you do? What's he meaning? What is HTML5 for you? That's what I think too. What's HTML5? It's obviously a couple things, right? First thing is, it's new tags, it's new elements. Yes? Yes or no? Sure. If you're not going to answer me and play along with me, I will give you trick questions. How's that? It's new tags, it's new elements. That's only one little small piece of HTML5, though. Okay? But let's start there. Let's start talking about that. With Dreamweaver CS5.5, we wanted to make it easier for people to get started with HTML5. But one of the first things, it's so funny because one of the first things I was asked from someone was, hey, my boss wants us to make an HTML5 site, make our site HTML5. I said, well, how did you build it? He says, well, you know, we built it in normal, just HTML. I said, okay, well, let me just sort of point something out to you. Hopefully you are all building using CSS today, are you? No one's doing tables, please tell me. Okay, good. Okay, no one's tabling, everyone is doing CSS. All right, great. When you get started with a new project, a new page, how do you do it?
Using scratches.
I'm sorry?
Using scratches.
Using scratch, okay. So in other words, you need some kind of framework, I call it, right? Yeah, exactly. So here's what we've done in Dreamweaver CS. Well, this was actually in CS3, then CS4, and now CS5, and now CS5.5. We added what we call starter layouts. Starter layouts are just frameworks, if you will, of differing styles of page. I'm just going to go ahead and create one here so we can see a little bit of, this is sort of what it looks like. We are not intending this to be a beautiful design. There was never a design idea here. This was just to say, you know what? If we look at all the pages on the web, in fact, let me pull that dialog back up. If we look at all the pages on the web, we went out and we counted every one of them. No, we didn't. but we looked at a large majority. And of all the pages on the web, they really fell into three categories. 1 column, 2 column, and 3 column pages. If you think about it, when's the last time you saw a 5 column web page? Probably haven't. Why? Because that'd be too hard. You know, it starts getting hard once we get past 3. So here's what we did. We actually gave you 1 column, 2 column, and even 3 column layouts. We made them fixed width as well as flexible widths. Okay, just to get you started. Now, the idea is that behind the scenes, we've already written some code for you. So we've actually written the CSS. Now, what's really hard to see here, so I'll highlight it, is that for every one of the rules in the CSS, that's not even readable, but you've actually have comments. We've actually commented, what does this rule do? So that as you want to modify it, you know what dependencies might there be for those individual rules. And we basically laid everything out for you. Now, this document, let me go back and start again. As I'm just creating one of these, in the old days, I probably would have done something like that, put it in XHTML, and you may be still building in XHTML today. So let me just go ahead and create that. The page looks exactly the same. The only thing that has changed, of course, is just the doc type right up there. That's the old XHTML doc type. So if your boss ever comes to you and says, we need an HTML5 site, all you have to do is remove that and replace it with an HTML5 doc type, and that looks like that. So even better, Dreamweaver can do it for you. You see, all you do in Dreamweaver is you go highlight that, find, and then go over here, copy, paste, and say, do it in my entire site, and just hit replace all. And you've changed your entire site from HTML4 or XHTML to HTML5. Now, don't tell your boss it took you only like half a second to do it, right? This is going to take at least a week, maybe two, if the weather's nice. Right? So, but that's really, it's really sad, because that's really all we're talking about, is just a change in one line of code. Now, would it make sense for you to change, even though down here in my code, everything is still, I'm still using div class equals header, div or UL class equals nav. That's the old school way of doing things. Does it make sense to change to an HTML5 doc type? Or even better question, is there anything wrong with doing this? Should I not do that? Answer? Absolutely.
It's okay to use divs even in HTML5.
Absolutely it is. And it's okay to use doc type HTML, an HTML5 doc type, even Internet Explorer 6 goes, dude, that's cool. Even Internet Explorer 6 is perfectly happy with that doc type, or wherever it was up there. It's perfectly happy. So you can change all your doc. From now on, if you ever write an XHTML or HTML 4.0 doc type, you're just trying to impress friends by being able to remember all of that, because there's no reason, okay? So what's the big deal then with HTML5? Well, HTML5 really represents an evolution of the language to give us more semantic elements, new tags. Why? Why do I need more tags? Well, for the very reason that I pointed out. Going back down here. Every single page that I have created in the last 12 years, maybe 11 years or so, has had div class or ID equals header. By the way, should you use an ID or a class?
It depends on how many headers you have on the page.
That would be one reason, yes. But
It's unique or not. If it is,
depends if it's,
IDs.
depends on if it's unique or not, if it is IDs. I would love to say you're right, but you're actually wrong. Why? Myself, I did the same thing. I used to do that all the time. Div ID equals header. That's why, because I said there's only going to be one header on the page. Div ID equals footer. Div ID equals nav, because I've only got one nav, one header, one footer.
Seems logical.
Seems absolutely logical. Until I heard a person by the name of Nicole Sullivan talk. Nicole is the person who invented the idea of object-oriented CSS. Say what? Object-oriented CSS. Basically, she approaches CSS like she approaches programming, making it more object-oriented. Well, what does that mean? Well, she did some tests. And in fact, a little company named Google hired her to do some tests, on speed. And what she found out was if you remove IDs from the page, your page speed increases dramatically. Because believe it or not, finding an ID, the browser, and I've talked since I've had the good fortune to go to Google several times. I've talked with a number of engineers on the Chrome team. And one guy, Alex, gave a presentation recently where he talked, it was actually one of my most favorite presentations, most memorable. It was called What Your Browser Thinks of Your Page. And he really went through and showed the process that the browser goes through in rendering your page. And one of the things that he found out, and that supported Nicole's findings, is that when the browser hits that ID, div ID equals, do you know what it does? It goes, ooh, remember that. Hold on for that just a second. Oh my God, I better look through the, okay, is there any other ID called header in this entire page? No, there's not. Okay, whew, all right, that's good. All right, let's move on. And so by using IDs, what you're actually doing, if you're a JavaScripter, you're putting in a break. You're really putting in a break for it to go, hang on just a second. Let me just make sure everything is cool up to now. So really, IDs should be used very sparingly. I use them still. Very rarely, I will have to override something, and I want to make sure that it absolutely is overridden, because an ID in the cascade is the most powerful of all of them. So therefore, I override using an ID if I absolutely have to, okay? So that's just something to bear in mind. So going back to the presentation, so I used to do div ID equals header, div class equals header, whatever, either one. And so did we all. In fact, that is what was found when the W3C splintered and the HTML5 working group, the WHATWIG as it's now called, was formed. They looked at the structure of pages on the web and found out everybody was doing div ID equals header, div ID equals nav, div ID equals footer, div ID equals article, or whatever it happened to be. And they said, that's stupid. Let's make new elements. So that's where we now have, in Dreamweaver, we gave you 2 to get you started, so in case you're not familiar with all the elements. So we gave you a 2-column and a 3-column. And these, again, shockingly, look exactly the same. Because again, it's not about the look, it's about giving you a starting point. So with these documents, if we switch back over, still have all my CSS here. And by the way, the reason the CSS is in my page is simply because I've chosen to put it there, all right? I could obviously put that into an external file if I wanted. This is just, by the way that I work. I don't know how you work when you develop. I always put everything in the same page I'm working on to start, just so I don't. I really do. I work internally in my document until I'm feeling comfortable that I've got the structure going, that I've got things working pretty good, and then I'll move everything to an external sheet and continue to work, okay? But anyway, we have here header, nav, aside, article, section, and somewhere down at the bottom, footer. Those are those new semantic elements of HTML. Now, where's the footer go?
It depends on CSS.
Well, no, I mean in the flow of the document. In the DOM structure, where does the footer go? At the end. Where does the header go?
At the top.
At the top. Or not. Watch this. Footer, cut, header. I'm inside the header. Footer. I just put my foot in my head. Wow, is that legal? Only in 3 countries in the EU, but everyone else has outlawed that. No, it is legal. It is completely legal. Here's the thing. When I saw HTML5 the first time, I said, well, it sort of doesn't make a lot of, I mean, huh? Do we really need a header tag and a footer tag and a nav tag? I mean, really? Then someone explained it to me. This is to semantically mark up my page, right? To really semantically identify what's going on in the page. So, can I have a footer and a header? Absolutely. I could actually have a header and a footer. That's more painful, though. That was a joke. I can have a header and a footer. I can have a header in an article because, hey, an article probably does have a header. You could even have a footer in an article. Okay. I could have a very long article that needed to be divided up into sections. And to get to between each section, I could have nav for my article only. Oh. So this is actually the principles around HTML5, the new semantic markup, is that you are actually marking up what semantically something should look like. Now, you guys won't know this, but just recently, a couple of months ago in the United States, the annual Rite of Spring happened. It's called the opening day of the baseball season. Okay? And American baseball, I hate it, it's stupid, it's boring, but a lot of people like it, and opening day is a big deal. The Major League Baseball Association, that's the league that runs baseball in the US, hired an agency to make a bunch of microsites to sort of highlight players and things about baseball. And one of the guys who was the superstar of last year's championship game, he was a pitcher. His name is Brian Wilson. And they did a microsite for Brian Wilson. And Brian has a really big bushy beard. In fact, he has a tradition of not cutting his beard during the entire baseball season, which is 9 months long. So yeah, it gets really big and bushy, and he doesn't comb it or anything. So it's, you know, nasty. But the reason I'm telling you this is my wife, who is one of the big superstars in the CSS and HTML world, they came to her and said, we need to build this microsite because the agency was building it in Flash. And so they needed to be able to see it on an iPad. So she was hired to build it in HTML5, in HTML so that it could be displayed on the iPad. Again, why am I telling you this story? Because she, of course, said, well, I'm going to build it in HTML5. And using real, proper semantic markup. Now, what you need to know about this page is there's only one page. That's it. It's just one. It's the picture of the guy's head with his big bushy beard. And the idea for you is you sort of move your mouse around through his beard, and there's hidden hot spots in his beard that causes things to pop up, his Twitter feed. You can go in and see videos of what's happening right there in his beard. There's like ninjas in there fighting and all sorts of, it's just silly, okay? It's a silly site. It's not meant to be serious at all. But we had the best fun talking about how should she mark up the page. What's an aside? What's an article? What's a section? Are there sections in the beard? We actually finally decided the beard was actually the navigation. So in other words, with HTML5, as you were thinking, the sad part is this is what my wife and I do at home. We talk about semantic markup. And we looked at each other in the end of the day and said, that was ridiculous. We just wasted an entire day debating whether this beard should be an article, a sectioned article, a nav, and it really doesn't matter. No one cares. So as you move forward in your markup, I encourage you to think logically about these elements, but don't get hung up in, well, this really should be a footer, but I could maybe make it an aside, or a section, or who cares, move on, okay? Don't get too hung up in it, in other words. All right, so with all of that silliness aside, let's talk about some other aspects of HTML5 that really is not so much HTML5. So one piece of HTML5 that we've just talked about is the semantic markup. There are many other technologies that go in under HTML5. I'll come back to a few a little bit later, right? But one of the other things that we're hearing people talk about HTML as HTML5 is not really HTML5. let's just talk through, and hopefully you guys can see it. Can you guys see that okay? So this is a design that I'll be working on throughout the rest of the presentation. Looking at this design from an HTML perspective, designing this and building this in HTML and CSS perspective, do you see any issues or problems with this comp, with this design? Something that would be challenging in traditional, you said you weren't building in HTML5, CSS3, so anything challenging?
That's
The background?
no, the columns.
The columns, okay. All right.
It's round corners.
Oh, rounded corners. First thing anybody ever sees, rounded corners. You do realize if you put the HTML5 doc type in, you must have at least one rounded corner on your page. It's a law. The HTML police will come and arrest you if you don't. No, that's not true. But yes, rounded corners, okay, that's one. There's a really big problem.
There's a circle image.
Oh, it's circle, okay, a circle image, all right. There's a big problem. Starts here, goes all the way to there. Yeah, a huge background image, exactly right. Huge. Now, I'm even running it like
There's a video also.
Yeah, there's a video. Okay, gonna have to solve that problem. Anything else? You can't tell it really, but those aren't fonts that you find on most computers. It's a problem. Sort of hard to see. Let me zoom in, see if we can. Yeah, maybe the footer's in that. You never know. Sort of hard for you guys to see it here, but maybe you can. Can you see there's something in this image? It's right here. Oh, and it goes off. Yeah, we're actually seeing through all of the content. If you look up at the head, you can actually see the building through the red. All right. So when we set out to begin talking about HTML5 and CSS3, what I like to do is always base it on something real. And so I built this page. You like it? It's beautiful. But the story I tell is the designer that I worked with is dead now because I killed him. No, I didn't really. Because every one of these challenges is like, are you crazy? Really? Every one of these is a huge, huge challenge for us to overcome. But every single one of them can be overcome, not only overcome, but will display and render in every browser that I want it to. Through HTML5, CSS3, and a little bit of JavaScript. Okay, so that's what we're going to go and do now. Now, I've actually started the page already. I started doing this page using those starter layouts that I pointed out earlier. I want to tell you, even professionals use starter layouts because I don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again every time I make a new project or a new page. My wife uses the starter layouts. You know how I know? She built them. We actually hired her to build all those starter layouts. Okay? She uses them to this very day. So don't feel bad about using a starter layout. You know, I talk with professionals all the time, and we were even Tom and I were just at an agency, and they said, "Oh, we don't use Dreamweaver. You know, it's a bad tool. You know, we're professionals." Really? Professionals that like to waste time? Because I like to get my job done so that I can go drink beer in the sun. All right? So anything that helps me move faster is a good thing. All right. So think about that when you're starting out. I started with these starter layouts. Now, here's the thing. I will tell you, you know, a lot of these people that look at Dreamweaver and go, Dreamweaver. They're going, oh, it doesn't render properly. This isn't the way it looks in the browser. Well, if you tell me that today, I will tell you, you've not seen Dreamweaver in about 4 years, have you? Because we have something called Live View. This button right here, when I turn it on, watch the page change, because Live View actually is the browser. Which browser? The browser. That's a joke. It is the most popular browsing engine, actually. Okay? We looked at the various engines out there, and we chose WebKit, which is the same one that Google uses in Chrome, that Apple uses in Safari. So in Dreamweaver, when you turn on Live View, you've actually just turned on WebKit. Okay? In fact, now I'm not on the web, but you will notice right up here, I actually have an address bar. You can type in anything in that address bar in Live View, and you're, let's go surfing now, everybody's learning. Okay. See, I told you my music career was a failure. You're actually surfing inside of Dreamweaver. You can surf right inside of Dreamweaver, okay? Because it's WebKit, it's the browser. Okay, so what you are seeing is the real deal. Now, we talked about HTML5, and I talked about these starter layouts. So this is the real deal. You're going to see it if we were to run over into Chrome right now. We're going to see the page looks exactly the same. If we were to do the same running into Safari, again, page would look exactly the same because they are both based on the same engine. Running over into Firefox, page looks exactly the same. Firefox doesn't use WebKit, but Firefox is just as standards compliant as WebKit is, or almost. And so therefore, my page is going to look the same. If we were to run into Opera, same thing would be the case. So with that, we've covered all the browsers.
Not yet.
Sure.
No, you're missing the Internet Explorer.
Right, exactly. The exploder. Yes, Internet Exploder. So nice. Yes, I'm on a Mac, so I'm not running over into Internet Explorer. I could start up VMware if you would like me to, and show you the page would look the same in Internet Explorer 9. In 8, 7, and 6, not so much. So that was back to your point of I don't want to build because in HTML5 because of the browsers. Now, actually, I lied. If we were to look at this page in Internet Explorer 8, 7, or 6, it would look almost the same. Everything would be positioned exactly where you see it. Every single thing. But wait, how can that be? Because we actually know that this, if I go back to my source code here, this is actually an article. That whole thing right here, that's an article. How can Internet Explorer 8, 7, or 6 know that that's an article and lay it out properly? Well, those starter layouts that I told you about, they're really cool. Because those starter layouts also have a little piece of code right here. This on line 8 is what is known as an Internet Explorer conditional comment. Now, I used to build using only Internet Explorer conditional comments. I now no longer do. But for this particular purpose, I use an Internet Explorer conditional comment. Are you familiar with IECCs? Yes? Okay. So for anyone that's not, basically what it is, it's a comment that only Internet Explorer sees. All other browsers see it and ignore it. They look at it and go, look at it. Internet Explorer looks at it and goes, something special. So Internet Explorer sees it and says, wow, I'm supposed to read some extra stuff. And so it says, if less than crappy browser 9, right? No. If less than Internet Explorer 9. So in other words, Internet Explorer 8, 7, and 6 are all going to see this and say, oh, I'm supposed to do something because I'm less than 9. What am I supposed to do? And they do this, which is a script, a JavaScript, commonly known or referred to as the HTML5 shiv, being hosted on Google Code. And it is just an HTML5 JS file. Now, a guy named Remy Sharp out of the UK wrote this and open sourced it, put it up on Google Code for us all to share and use. Basically, if you were to look at this, it's really only about a 13-line JavaScript. But what it actually does is create the DOM objects, article, nav, header, section, footer, and so on and so forth. The most commonly used HTML5 elements. And then IE 6, 7, and 8 all go, dude, that's cool. I'll do it. So they will then lay out the page exactly as we are seeing it rendered in our WebKit browsers. Okay? So pretty cool. You can put that line of code in. You can use any element you want. Okay? Now, the CSS side of things, a little bit different. Okay? So they're not going to necessarily see all of the new cool CSS3 stuff that we're doing. All right? For example, well, I'll come back to the example in a second, what they wouldn't see. But let's just do some just to show you some fun CSS. One of the things that I don't know why this is, but I got really excited about with CSS3 is a new color space or color spaces. Now, we have 3 columns here. And if you've not used Dreamweaver or not looked at it recently, let me just sort of tell you what I'm looking at here. I've got a CSS panel over here, and the CSS panel is actually telling me the rules that are the cascade, if you will, for any element that I click on. Okay? So as I go and begin to, click into this element, it says, okay, you're inside of a P, and in the cascade, we've got a long rule where P is also included. We've got an inline style for something. We've got a class, and so on. It's giving me the entire cascade that is being affected. Okay? What's even cooler, you guys use Firebug? Yeah. Firefox? Okay? Yeah, every single day, exactly. So very similar to Firebug. If I was to move up in the chain, you'll see things sort of hard to see a little bit. So let me zoom in. Hopefully you can see it better. See things struck through. That's telling me, of course, that that element, zoom back out, that element was overridden. Here, there are properties here. This margin bottom does not apply to your selection because it's not inherited. It's applied to an enclosing tag, all right? So giving me all the information that I need to know about why something may not have been looking like I thought it would be because it's been overridden at some point in the chain. All right, so this particular column, or all these columns, have a class applied to it called EQ height. I'll just sort of prove that by highlighting some stuff in other columns here. And you can see that they each one have in their cascade EQ height. Now, I'm going to use EQ height because the only thing that right now EQ height does is assign a background color. All right. The background color was the transparency. You remember in our design that the designer wanted. We wanted to be able to see through. There's no way to do transparency, or wasn't a way to do transparency in the past. But with CSS3, we very definitely can. Here's how we do it. I've got my color swatch here. Let's just move over here. And you see my color is currently defined as FFF. I've been working on the web for, what did I tell you, 17 years? Oh my God, I'm old. 17 years, and I still can't tell you anything other than FFF000 and CCC. The rest of them, I have no clue what they are. No clue. Okay? Hexadecimal colors do not make sense to me. Okay? So whenever I need a hexadecimal color, I always look for a color picker. I need that. I need help. Okay? But I'm not even going to use a hexadecimal. Hey, that bluish color is 09C. That's intuitive. Yeah, right. So I want something that makes more sense to me as a graphic, visually thinking person. So one of the really cool things about CSS3 is we have new color formats. We still have the hexadecimals if you want them, but we also have RGB, which is, of course, red, green, blue, or HSL, which is hue, saturation, and luminance. Now, I'm an RGB fan. My wife is an HSL fan. Seriously, and I thought she was lying. I've seriously said things like, okay, what color is it? And she'll say, oh, that one would be, and she'll be able to tell me pretty close to exact in HSL. That's why I think she's a witch, actually. I said witch with a W, not a B. Okay, no. Because this is being taped. Right. No, she can do it. She can think in her mind HSL because apparently it's very logical. Me, I still think red, green, and blue. All right? So I'm going to say, you know what? I would rather use an RGB color. And even better, we also have RGBA and HSLA. The A standing for alpha. Right. So I'm going to choose RGBA. And notice now as I move around, that very same blue that we were looking at before is no longer 09C. It's now 0153204.1. Okay? I'm going to choose the white, though, which, of course, is 255, 255, and 1. The 1 is, of course, the opacity, the alpha transparency. 1 is completely opaque. 0 is completely transparent. Any number in between represents the opacity. So I will change this. Now, watch here. And because we're projecting in sunlight, I'm going to make this just really, really obvious. I'll go 0.4. And you're now seeing through that item. Now, using RGBA is different than using opacity. There is an opacity CSS property, right? But if you do that, if I was to have put opacity onto these 3 columns, guess what would have happened? Testing your CSS. Exactly. The content would have had its opacity changed as well. So we would have 40% opacity on the text, 40% opacity on the pictures, which would have looked really stupid in this design. So that's why I am really excited about RGBA and HSLA, because I can put opacity or alpha transparency on just the elements that I'm interested in. Now let me make this just a little bit easier so we can see things a little bit better like that. Okay, so that's that new color space, the new color spaces. Again, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Opera, IE9 all support this. 8, 7, and 6, I'll have to use a filter. Okay, I'll have to use a Microsoft filter in order to do that. You know, it's a trade-off. In this design, I probably wouldn't even bother with 8, 7, and 6. I probably would just say, you know what, they're going to get a white background, and they're never even going to know. So this is just something I want to toss this out to you guys as web professionals. I want to toss this out to you. We very often get bogged down in the idea of making everything look the same across all the browsers. Why? Well, that's the way we do things, Greg. We're professionals. No. Because you know what professional means? In many cases, obsessive, compulsive disorder. Right. That's what you are as a professional. If you are, okay, I'm glad you're sitting down. I have shocking news. Only you guys do this. The rest of the world does not pull a web page up in Firefox and then go, ooh, let's go look at it in Chrome. Oh, let's go look at it in Internet Explorer. Oh, look at that, there's a difference. If you don't believe me, go home and ask your mother to launch Firefox. Your mother will go, huh? Do what? Mom, get on the internet. She'll go, okay, I'll click on the E. Okay? The rest of the world doesn't look at pages in multiple browsers. We are the only ones that do that. Yes.
What would you say to your client that opens Firefox and in the second window opens Internet Explorer and compares the pages? Because that would be our only problem.
Right, exactly. First of all, your client's not going to do that, quite honestly. But it does bring up a very interesting point, one that my wife and I have debated quite often, and that is, what do you show the client? What do you show the client? Do you show it like that? Or do you show it with the solid white background that he might see in IE? Do you show it with the rounded corners or without the rounded corners? You know, it's a very interesting question. I'm not suggesting that I have the answer, because I don't. I mean, we are still debating this. What do you show the client?
Well, it must not be completely broken.
Right. Well, what I would say you propose to the client and you show the client is during the learning phase, during the scoping out of the project, you ask them, what is our targeted browser or browsers? And then you show them how it's going to look in that browser or browsers, right? And don't worry about showing them that there might be differences in other browsers. They're never going to know. And even if they do, you've already scoped it. This is to work in, the reference platform is Internet Explorer 9, or the reference platform is Firefox 4. If you're doing that, then you're out of the woods, because then you can always go back and say, hey, you said Firefox 4 or whatever it happened to be, okay? So let's do some more fun. Let's do the rounded corners, because again, we must, otherwise the HTML police will come bursting through the door. We'll use that same EQ height. Now, one of the really cool things that we've done in Dreamweaver CS 5.5 is, of course, we have updated all of the CSS3, or all of our CSS code hinting with all the new CSS3 properties. So now, here are all of the CSS properties. There's not that many, thankfully, so really, it doesn't take very long to learn them. Oh, there we go. All right. There's a lot there. There's really a lot there. But that is every single one of the CSS3 properties, whether they are being used today or not. All right, so we just put them in there for you. The one that we are going to use for the rounded corners, if I head on back up to the top here, is actually called border radius. It's right there, border radius. Let's zoom in so you can see. All right, so border radius is what we're going to use. And what's neat is now border radius has a very simple syntax, but sort of hard for some people to get their head around. So we actually created this little pop-up here that helps you actually see and say whether you want a rounding on all of the corners or on individual corners. So you can decide. Now, here's the cool part. And again, what I'm really proud of here in Dreamweaver CS 5.5, all right, watch the corners, watch every single corner in my columns here. We'll go boom, 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 boom. I'm just sitting here deleting the values, and it is live updating. So I can experiment with my design, and guess what? It's in the browser. This is the browser showing it to me, okay? So another thing that I sort of like to point out, you say you use Firefox every day. I mean, Firebug every day. Dude, I did too. I used to. I no longer do. In fact, now even in Firebug, I find myself going, well, how do you do something? Because, if you can't tell, our goal was to completely eliminate the need for Firebug, because I'm doing it live. My change has already happened. Could I have done that in Firebug? Sure. You go over, you make the change, you hit enter to confirm, then you let the page update, then you say, no, I don't want that. So you go back over, you try to find it, click to edit again, delete, make your change, hit enter again. Now your page updates, you go, okay, 20 is what I want. All right, now let's go back to Notepad. or whatever, and find it in the CSS. Oh, there it was. Okay, 20 was what I wanted. Great. Now let's save that because, of course, you never trust Notepad. Let's save it, and then let's go back to the browser, refresh to make sure that that actually did happen. Right? That's exactly how we work. That's how I used to work all the time. So that's what's really wickedly cool, is being able to interact with my CSS in a very visual way. Now, at this point, what have we just done? Well, we put the rounded corners on. Who gets to see them?
The rounded corner syntax is different for different users.
Right. But who gets to see them right now? What have we done? We've just done border radius.
I don't know.
So we get the rounded corners in Chrome. We get the rounded corners in Safari if you are using the 2 latest versions. If you're back on Chrome 10, you don't get rounded corners. If you're up on 11, you get them. If you are on the current version of Safari, you get them. If you're on a previous version, you don't. Firefox, you get them if you're in 4, but if you're in 3.6, you don't get them. Opera, you get them if you're in, what is it, also 11, I think, or 12. You get them, but if you're in previous ones, you don't get them. So what do you want to do? Well, I want to serve to everyone. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little right-clicking here and say go to code. Now, I've been using this panel only because I find the panel very quick to use. But if I want to, I've opened up my split view window. In fact, I'm going to close this panel here for a minute and just toggle it closed. So now, if I'm a hand coder, we welcome you too. In fact, I do all of my stuff basically by hand. So here we are over in the CSS. There is that EQ height rule. There's the border radius that we have so far. But as we know, we just said there are other older browsers that we also want to serve because actually rounded corners have been in WebKit and been supported in WebKit, been supported in Firefox for actually many, many versions, if not years. Okay? They've just done it through vendor-specific prefixes. So a vendor-specific prefix is that thing that starts with a dash. And in Dreamweaver CS5.5, let me just zoom in over here so we can see it a little better. Blink. All right, I'll say dash. Dreamweaver immediately says, oh, dude, you want a vendor-specific prefix. So I say, yes, I do. When I choose one, let's do WebKit first since we're talking about WebKit to start. Move down just a little so you can see all of this as it happens. I'm going to say, go for WebKit, thank you. Here are all of the things that are supported through the vendor-specific prefix just for WebKit. Okay? Now, border radius is one of those, so I could start typing BORDER dash R. Oh, finally. Are you lazy? Who's lazy? If you're raising your hand right now, you're not lazy. This young lady's this is the only lazy one here. You know why? She was too lazy to raise her hand. She's the laziest one among us. All right. I'm lazy, and I don't want to write BORDER dash R to finally get down there. So what's cool is in all of our code hinting now, and this is CSS, JavaScript, HTML, it doesn't matter. If you are in the text window, text editing code window of Dreamweaver, now all you need to do is type something that's unique to what you're looking for. So let's say IU, oh, look at that. It already found border radius. And I go, okay, boink. And so it deleted the IU, replaced it with border radius, and we're ready to rock. So I'll say 30 pixels. Boink. All right, now we'll do Moz, boink, and say, all right. Now, this is all of the list. It's a different list because these are all the things that Mozilla supports through its vendor-specific prefix. So again, we'll try it, IU. Oh, there we go. We got border radius for them. All right. And then we'll go dash O, and oh, that's all there is for Opera. So I'm not going to be able to give them rounded corners because they said screw a vendor-specific prefix implementation. We'll just implement it straight off the bat with rounded corners the right way. Okay? Ooh, what about, did you see that other guy? Dun, dun, dun. Microsoft said, if you can't beat them, join them. We'll do it too. So Microsoft with Internet Explorer 9 has introduced support for vendor-specific prefixes. Now, just so you know, a lot of us sort of, I've heard people complain about vendor-specific prefixes in the past, but I want you to know that they're good. These are good things. Because through vendor-specific prefixes, browsers are implementing things without waiting on everybody else. If we were all waiting on all 4 browser vendors to agree, we'd still be on Mosaic 1. That was a joke for the old timers. Because we're not going to all agree. And if you don't believe me, just look at the HTML5 spec. It's a nightmare of disagreement. And so the browsers have all said, we are going to implement things that we like, that we can get done at our own pace. And I applaud Microsoft for finally getting rid of the filters, because those are resource hogs, and going with CSS implemented vendor-specific prefixes. So I don't even know. Oh, they don't have a border radius either. You know why? Because IE9 already supports border radius. Okay, but so you see, these are some different things that they do as well. Okay. So it's really cool. My point to you is this: we did it here because we are staying with CS 5.5. We wanted to stay right there. We are on the cutting, leading edge with all of our code hinting at everything that is absolutely current right now. Now, the one thing, if you've never looked at this, please do me the favor. Whoops. Notice the order that I put these in. I don't care if you do WebKit, then Mozilla, or Mozilla, then WebKit, and then Opera, or whatever. But of course, the rule is always the real one last. It's CSS. It cascades. So even our WebKit browser, if I was to remove this, our browser would still see rounded corners, because it sees this. A little bit later, it sees this and goes, oh, okay, yeah, I already got you. Got you covered. I understood that. Okay? So always remember the last property, or the last property should be the real one. Okay, are we having fun yet? Last thing I want to do for you is, so the last big challenge of CSS and HTML5 with regards to CSS is delivering an experience on these devices. Okay? We design things, we think of normally when we design, sadly, let me start that over. Sadly, when we design, today, as a designer, you think, oh, big screen. And you design for that big screen. When you then see your page on other devices, not so good. Now, looks beautiful, still looks exactly the same as not exactly the same. There's no rounded corners, no transparency. Let me go ahead and update, just so you can see that I did this live. So rounded corners, transparency. So you see, I am working on the real files. Problem is, can you read that? Even if I tap to zoom, okay, now it's getting a little bit better, right? But that's the whole thing, is we've got to do a lot of pinching, zooming, swiping, scrolling to be able to see anything designed like that. And that's on an iPad. Now, it gets even worse over here, because over here, I can't see anything. Even when I double tap to zoom, this is just, I'm going to have to. Okay, now, there we go. Now, this is going to be real easy to read. All right, I let him know I've reached my caffeine maximum. Sit down with a juice. What? That's not an experience. Well, it is an experience, it's just not a good one. I have other cuss words that I can use, right? So, how do we overcome these challenges? Well, the other challenge that we want to, or the other benefit of CSS3 is we can overcome these issues through CSS. One of the great things about CSS3 that I'm also very excited about is something called a media query. You guys familiar with media queries? Okay. Media queries are simply the ability to say, serve this style sheet to this device, or under these circumstances, really. That's what it is. Not really so much as a device, but under certain circumstances. Show you what that looks like, because we've implemented in Dreamweaver CS5.5. I've clicked on what we call the multi-screen button. The multi-screen button shows me 3 panels: phone, tablet, desktop. Now, that's just our names for it. We gave it some default sizes. If you want to change that, targeting different sizes, you can do that, all right? But those are my defaults, and they serve me pretty well. So here's what I want to do. I want to have a different experience for each one of these viewports. So I'll go to my Media Queries button and say, I would like to create a media query for this document. Now, you'll notice also we have a checkbox here. It says, force devices to report actual width. If you did not know this, your phone in your pocket, your tablet, your iPad, they lie. They report incorrect sizes, actually. On the Android operating, is it Android? Let me see, or is it, no, yes, Android. I had to remember. On the Android operating system, for example, on the browsers, when you begin to scroll, the navigation bar leaves the window. Therefore, you suddenly have a different height. Huh? Yeah. So in other words, it can be very hard to know, did I get it right? Okay, do I have the right size? By using this checkbox, there's actually a piece of metadata that we put into the head of the document that tells the device to report its actual physical screen size. Screw what Chrome I have around, not meaning Google Chrome, screw what Chrome I have from the browser that's visible. Tell me how many pixels is your screen wide and how many pixels is it tall. Done, end of story, okay? So that's really a great thing. Now, I'm going to just do this by simply saying, all right, the first media query, I'm going to say this is for desktop computers. Now, I have 2 fields, min width and max width. I'm approaching this always from large and cooking down. You can do it differently, but this is the way I find easiest. So what I know is that there's not a tablet in the world that has a screen width wider than 900 pixels. Okay? The iPad is 1024 by 768. Okay, so it's 768 wide. All right? The Motorola Zoom is 900 wide. So I know there's nothing else that I've seen, at least, so far. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say this one starts at a minimum width of 901. Okay, so if you cross over from 9 to 901, I know pretty sure, I'm almost certain you're on a desktop computer or you're on your TV or something like that, right? So I'm going to either use an existing file or create a new one. I'll just use an existing one because we're running low on time, so I'll just point to my desktop large.css. That's the exact same file that I'm already using here. Okay, so I've really just said use the same thing. Okay, now for my tablets, I know that those are only going to go up to 900 pixels. So I'm going to say use my tablet there. Now, if you wanted to, and you want to get into, really just driving yourself crazy, my next one is going to be phones. And, hello, thank you. Please select a file. I did. There you go. If you want to drive yourself crazy, you can actually put min width and max width. So only between this certain thing happening do I want this, and otherwise. That's originally the way we set out to build these, and we drove ourselves absolutely batty because trying to realize, okay, when exactly is this thing happening? Okay, all right. In fact, I even had to make a JavaScript that actually told me what classes were in effect in the page, just to even know. So finally, I've just decided I'll go with min and max just one or the other, all right, and build on that and use the cascade of CSS, okay? So here you go. Now, in our tablet, our columns aren't 3 columns anymore. We've now got a wide screen. For my phone, oh, look, that is my navigation that used to be up here. It's now moved and is now in nice big fat buttons so my big fat finger can hit it easily on a phone. Because that's what's important, right? So that's cool. Now, just to prove it, oh, did I save? I did not save. Let's save. Turn my phone back on. Okay. And let's refresh. There we go. Refresh over here. And there we go. I don't know if you can see that, but hopefully you can as I scroll down. Okay? So I've got the same page being delivered in 3 different ways. And you can add more if you want a 5th or 6th or 7th media query. Be my guest. You'll drive yourself crazy. But anyway, be my guest if you want to do that. The point is, through CSS, I'm able to deliver these differing experiences all with the same content. Okay? Something that would have been almost impossible to do previously. Now, what if I want to edit the phone look over here in Dreamweaver? Or even, what if I didn't have that existing file and I now needed to build it? Well, then you just do a lot of saving and refreshing and saving and refreshing. No, 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 no. Because we've got something new to address that as well. So we actually have what we call the window size manager. And what it's going to do is to tell the live view to adapt itself to that. So there is my tablet view. Here's my smartphone view. Okay. So it is actually reading the media query. And knock yourself out. Just like we were editing before, just like all the things you saw me doing before, I can continue working right here. I can use my panels. So I can go and I can click on one of those things and say, okay, what is that thing? You know, I want to change some padding or whatever it is for that particular element. And I'm going to see live updates to the media query that only will ever be seen on a phone, and yet I'm working on my computer. Pretty cool? Yeah. So, all right. One last thing to talk about, because I've talked about mobile. At this point, really, you know, if we were to see this, well, we were looking at it on my phone, you could tell we were in a browser, right? I mean, that was just sort of apparent. We're in a browser. How do you know? Well, because you're scrolling so much. So, of course, that's, you know, that's going to be, you don't scroll like that in a native application on your smartphone, or you don't scroll as far at least. And on a smartphone, you know, things don't look just like that. You know, they've got sort of a standard look. You know, if you look at any iPhone app, you can pretty much tell it's an iPhone. It's an app on an iPhone, right? Because there's that standard look and feel. So we wanted to address that as well. I'm going to just delete something I did a little bit earlier today. Just take that, throw it away. All right. So I've just changed to a completely new site here. And what I want to do is I want to create a brand new site that's going to look more like a real native site or native application. Start by saying new. But instead of choosing one of these starter layouts, I'm actually going to go choose something else, a mobile starter layout. You see, we actually have become members and sponsors of something called the jQuery Mobile Project. So we love jQuery at Adobe. In fact, we have several engineers that are now part of the jQuery team. So we pay their salary, they do things for jQuery. Okay, and specifically for the jQuery Mobile project. We're really proud about that. What's jQuery Mobile? Well, jQuery Mobile is just an extension of jQuery. So if you're familiar with jQuery, jQuery is a JavaScript framework. Well, jQuery Mobile is the JavaScript framework for mobile devices. But it also includes some UI elements as well. Let me go ahead and turn on that live view. Boink. And let's actually make our thing look more like a phone. There we go. All right. Hey, that actually looks like an iPhone app. And it behaves, boink, like an iPhone app. And it's got a back button, boink. There you go. All right. So this is jQuery Mobile. Now, jQuery Mobile, this is the jQuery Mobile UI. One of the things about jQuery Mobile, of course, you have, it's just, again, just HTML. So you can see I've got HTML here. We clicked on page 4. We went over and saw the content for page 4. Let's say we wanted more than 4 pages. I'm going to go down here toward the bottom, and I'm just going to take and add in another element. You see, because we also have jQuery Mobile widgets as well built into Dreamweaver CS5.5. So I'm just going to add a page, boink, which is just a data structure or an HTML structure here. So we're going to go ahead and give it an ID. We'll say that's ID of page 5. That's fine. We'll say, hello, Greg. And in our content, we'll say, how are you liking Dreamweaver CS5.5? All right, so you'll know that we're actually there. Okay, now, if I look back over here in my live view, if I go back over, just refresh the page to start out over. If we go back up here to the top, I have over here in my live view, I need to save. I haven't saved yet. Let's go ahead and do that. Boink. Call this index.html. There we go. As soon as I do so, Dreamweaver says, hey, you're using jQuery. I need some jQuery libraries. Is that OK? Can I go grab those for you? Yes, thank you very much. Copy those over. Thank you. Now we got it. Now, back up here in my list, let's toggle that for a second. I want the link to page 5, but I don't have that. So let's go up here in the list. We'll just copy, paste, paste, and I'll change that link over to ID page 5, and we'll say that is Greg's page. There, oops, I can't spell. Greg's page, there we go. And updating already, there's Greg's page, click, boink, we've navigated over. How do you like it? Okay, pretty cool. All right, so jQuery Mobile is pretty cool because not only does it give me all of this built-in functionality, by the way, if you don't like the look, jQuery Mobile has themes. You don't have to use them. You can style everything by hand if you want to be a real glutton for punishment. Or you can just say data, theme. Let's go old school. We'll go with B. There's the old school iPhone look. All right, say, oh, no, I don't like that. Let's go with D. That's a gray one. That's hard to see. All right, how about E? That's a yellow one. All right, not really a big fan of that. But anyway, so there are basic themes to get you started. And again, it's all CSS. So if you wanted to continue on, modifying on your own, that's cool. All right, so with that, the neat thing is now I can build sites. Are we calling them sites or apps? Or I don't know. I'm building a site that feels like it's a native app, even though I'm running in a browser on the mobile device, right? What if you wanted to build a native app? Not a problem. We'll go ahead and save this. Dreamweaver also adds mobile application development, meaning that you can actually take anything, if you can build it in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, you can turn it into an app. How? Well, the first thing is you need to configure your application frameworks. On the Mac, we support both Android and iOS. Now, on PC, we only support Android simply because Apple won't let us support iOS on a non-Apple machine. Now, if you've ever downloaded an SDK, by the way, and tried to install it, that's like the software developers kit, and only real geeky people know how to even like go get it and set it all up. And it talks about doing like, now all you need to do is change your path variable. And you go, my what? And so, yeah, I'm lost, right? That's why we put the easy button in there. If you click this button, we will go to the Google site, grab the Android SDK, download it for you, install it, set up all your path variables with one click of a button. It's wickedly cool. So once you've got that set up, then you say, okay, great. Tell me about your application. So you can give it your name, you can tell it what version it is, you can tell it what you're actually targeting, and when you're done, then you go, wicked. I wonder what this app would look like on the iPhone. So what are we doing here? Well, we just built the iPhone IPA file, or if we had done that for Android, we would have just built the APK file. How did we do it? We're actually using PhoneGap. PhoneGap is a framework that simply packages up HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as native applications for the given platforms. Now, PhoneGap by itself also supports Windows, BlackBerry, and other platforms, Symbian, and so on. But we've only chosen to support iOS and Android directly from within Dreamweaver. Okay? But even so, really wickedly cool. Because what it means is that you are free to build. Because once you tie into jQuery Mobile, now here's an app that I built, and you can see that I've got a slightly different look than we had before. My buttons aren't going all the way out to the edge. I don't have any bevels or anything like that. But when I tap, I'm still getting that same sort of functionality. Here are some jQuery mobile buttons, sort of hard to see. But one of the neat things about all of this is that when you tie into that PhoneGap.js file, so as soon as you select, you tell Dreamweaver, I'm building a PhoneGap project, it will link to PhoneGap.js, and that means you now can tie into all the things that PhoneGap is capable of doing for you, and that is native things, camera access, address book access, geolocation access, all the things, accelerometer, all the things that you would be interested in tying into on a mobile device. So here's the app that you just saw running in Dreamweaver. All right, so just to prove it, I'll tap that. So there's the sushi heaven. Anybody wanted to go for sushi? Yeah, okay, let's call them. So tied directly into the phone's dial pad. Okay, I'm not actually sure where they're at, so let's go ahead and map it. Oh, look at that. Can you guys see it? Did you know you had a restaurant over there in the park? That's not real data. That is actually really us, but I'm just mapping some fake addresses here. Oh, there's a Mexican restaurant down on, what is that, Cifratova? Something like that, Cifratova? Yeah. Do you know about that Mexican restaurant? Yeah, sure. So in other words, this is actually picking up the real geolocation data straight off of my phone. I was able to build that entire app. I literally started at 9 in the morning and I was done just a little after noon. And I didn't know what I was doing. Seriously, I'd never built a phone app before. Okay? So that is how cool building mobile experiences in Dreamweaver can be. So hopefully you see that, you know, when you hear us talk, oh, there was one other thing I was going to show, was it? Yeah. Oh, okay, one more thing. All right, one more thing. All right, one of the other really cool things that you're hearing about with HTML5 and CSS3 and all that is animations, right? So transforms, transitions that happen in CSS, that's pretty cool. WebKit is, of course, has implemented CSS-based animations as well. Now, let me pull this up, see if I can find it. Okay. Whoops. Must not. Oh, there. Okay. This is a CSS animation that's happening right now. And this is what it looks like. You have to do these things from and then to, and you tell the properties what properties are going to change along the way. Now, these animations are obviously not the greatest, especially coming from somebody that has an Adobe logo on their business card, right? I mean, I could do way better in Flash, right? Trying to figure out how to do all that WebKit animation stuff, you can do it. I mean, you can. I've been playing with it for quite some time. But it just is really, yeah, just not quite there. So, imagine, let's hide all of this. Imagine trying to do something, you know, a little bit more complicated like you would normally do in Flash, in all of that animation, you know, to, from, to, blah, 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 something even like that. Let me go, oops, open the Swift instead of the FLA. Let's open the FLA. Let me show you that again. Okay, you look at that and you go, oh, that's simple. All right, I got 3 different animations. I got the logo, or the words coming in from the right, words coming in from the bottom, they're sort of fading in, and then that airplane. But notice the airplane is actually doing a circular animation. Okay, ooh, good luck writing all that CSS, right? And that's a simple animation. That's not even hard. But in the CSS, I mean, it actually is quite involved. Wouldn't it then be cool if instead you could simply say, hey, I did this banner in Flash. And what I really would like is some HTML. And there you go. And this, my friends, is nothing more. There's my CSS. Oh, look. That is that circular animation. You see that? 52.17% followed by 56.52% followed by 60.86%. Oh my God, can you imagine trying to type that out by hand? Okay. So what we just did was we took Flash. If you can do it on the timeline through this project that we have, this preview release called Wallaby, and you can find it at labs.adobe.com. Wallaby takes an FLA file, a Flash file, and turns it into the necessary HTML, CSS, and yes, JavaScript, because we need to make sure that everything works not just with CSS animations, but also in older versions of IE that don't understand those animations. Okay? So pretty cool. Of course, I can also edit all of this because, hey, now I'm in my environment. I'm back in Dreamweaver. I'm doing JavaScript and CSS. Okay? Cool? All right. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming out and hanging out on the lunch break with me. And thanks for inviting me. Thanks.